Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me and see me as well as see my screen. We'll give a few more minutes for some other folks to hop on the session. Yeah, I mean, nobody ever starts right at the top of the hour. So again, we'll give a few minutes or so, wait for some folks to get in, and then we'll get going. Also, just to let everybody know, so this will be also an interactive session, mostly in the sense where we do have chat available or questions available to be submitted. Please feel free to submit any questions that you might have during the presentation. I'll be going over a slideshow, essentially just kind of going over some hot topics, let's say, and then going over into also a quick demonstration of our solution to kind of give you guys a feel as to what we have to offer. And then after that part of the webinar, then we'll have a time for questions. So again, we'll just give a few minutes because we're about 1 past right now. So bear with us and we'll get going shortly. All right, even though I did just say that we would maybe give it a few minutes, it looks like the attendee rate is somewhat stabilized and we're almost 2 minutes in. So you know what, I'll just get going here and we'll get off to the races. So again, hi everybody, this is John Pace from Safetica. Nice seeing you everybody again after the MES show. Again, good to have you all here. And naturally, as I mentioned earlier, if you heard it, great. If not, I'll say it again. We do want this to be an interactive session. We do have options to submit questions within the whole GoToWebinar, let's say, suite or what have you. And please feel free to submit any questions you might have or anything you're curious about into the chat or into the questions. And at the end of all of this, then we'll go into the Q&A part of things and yeah, have a chat about any questions you might have. So yeah, I guess I'll just kind of kick things off then. So again, welcome. So we're going to be going over kind of just the data security challenges that mid-enterprise is facing nowadays. I'm sure you can guess some of those things that we're going to be going over today. So I'll just kind of get right to it and kind of show you what the main topics we'll be talking about today. So I can imagine a lot of you would think that, yeah, cloud, sure, that's a normal one. More and more organizations are moving data to the cloud, and of course, keeping that data secure is also, it's an additional attack surface. It's something else that is more potentially difficult to control because you do not have physical control of it. It is from some other provider somewhere else, and the data is spread around to many different areas. Sometimes you might be using a private cloud, which is great. Sometimes it can be a public cloud, and also employees do have access to their own cloud data stores, depending on whatever that may be. And of course, we need to figure out ways to lock down that data to make sure it's not going where you don't want it to go. Also, something to talk about, also shadow IT. Mostly this is in relation to kind of unknown applications or things along those lines being used on machines. If employees do have certain rights to install certain software on machines, it may not be software that you want running on those machines. And also we'll go over a bit of kind of how we go about that, how we can look at that, and how we can also prevent these things. And last but not least, we're going to be talking about AI. Surprise, surprise, I'm sure for many of you. So regardless, artificial intelligence is, the hot topic, and it's going to be the hot topic, I think, for quite a while now. Also today, I just saw NVIDIA's earnings shot up again out the roof. They're not going anywhere, and the demand is just getting greater and greater and greater for anything AI related. And also, there's more and more tools out there that are being used to, of course, do many different various things with AI. And of course, a lot of company data can be going into those LLMs. And that's definitely something you don't want happening. You don't want that going into some black box where you don't really know what's going on with it, and you want to be able to control it in some which way or form. So regardless, we will be going over these 3 topics today. And again, if anybody has any questions on anything or any comments or anything they would like to say really, or any questions or again, what have you, please feel free to put those into the chat or into the questions section. So I'll just get going here and get right into the cloud side of things here. So Naturally, over the past, let's say 10 years or so, the adoption towards cloud, and potentially even longer really, but it's been a, evolving process. Some companies are still very much so. We want to keep our data on premise, although that is seemingly to be a smaller and smaller minority of companies that are going that way. Most are trying to put as much as they can onto the cloud to reduce their infrastructure costs, and also just some complexity in general of management. Especially, if you've got a handful of file servers, that's fine. But if you've got, databases that you manage and maintain yourself, that's a lot of infrastructure to maintain and make sure everything's up to date and working correctly. You have to have the individuals to service that and manage it and so on and so forth. And it's just something, it's much easier to pay somebody a, subscription fee essentially to manage all of that for them. And that is essentially, the whole idea behind cloud storage and companies putting their data into AWS, or can be 365 environment, or let's say Azure, or what have you. So anyways, we can see now, 70% of organizations will be using cloud protection services also by 2026. And with so many companies also putting all of this data into the cloud, there needs to be a way to, of course, also control that data and make sure it's not going where it shouldn't. Again, with the traditional file server or something along those lines, you can lock that down to a degree just with the file server itself, but maybe some solutions that are coming with, Windows File Server or something like that, or maybe some other options as well. But with data in the cloud, it is much harder to restrict that data potentially, and also who may have access to that and downloading it or sharing it directly from the cloud and all these sort of things. And naturally, this is something that Safetica can help with and does help any organizations with nowadays. Switching to the shadow IT side of things. So also with shadow IT, a lot of organizations also are feeling some threats when it comes to individuals either installing or using certain applications on their machines that it may not be authorized. And same can go for even websites or certain access when it comes to the web. You don't want necessarily people being able to download potentially malicious software onto their machines. You also don't necessarily want people accessing some random data stores on the web and sending information up to there, and this again, places where it probably shouldn't go. Of course, you can always think about, some malware being put on machines by somebody downloading something and, running some applications like that, which could infect the system and potentially the rest of the environment. But this is more in the case where, it could be also productivity monitoring or things along those lines, especially with so many folks working either remotely or in a hybrid sense. And a lot of organizations don't necessarily know what people are doing while they're at work, let's say. Some can be very diligent, of course, while they're working at home. Some work even better at home, I find I do sometimes. But also, you just don't know what people are doing. They could be playing games on their computers, they could be watching movies, they could be doing many different things. And if you don't know, you don't know. And that's, again, something that Safetica can assist with in terms of monitoring the usage of applications, as well as websites and things along those lines, to ensure that, one, there's just not any sort of malicious software potentially being run on those machines, but also keeping track to make sure that people are doing what they should be doing while they are at work. I'll get into also this within the demonstration and kind of show you how we go about that. We can also configure this where we don't see anything and everything. Some organizations, they don't want to be monitoring these things. They don't want to be in the business of that, and that's perfectly fine. That can be either, toggled on or off with our solution. But regardless, having the insight into these sort of things is very, very beneficial for many organizations. And last but not least here, in terms of just some quick topics before we do get over more so to the demonstration side of things, but naturally, AI. So when it comes to AI, we all know that everybody's using ChatGPT or Copilot or what have you when they're just trying to do some simple everyday tasks, whether that be maybe some configuration in some solutions they have and they're not actually sure how to do it. They don't want to Google it or search on the internet, so they'll ask, ChatGPT or what have you. But there's also many other options where people might be grabbing some potentially sensitive information from the organization to, I don't know, help them do this, that, or the other. It could be just write an email or something like this, but maybe the email is about the company's financials and they need to make a report and send it to somebody, and they figure, oh, it'll just be easier to copy and paste all of this data, put it into ChatGPT, and it'll spit out what I should write. But in doing that, you're giving this LLM a massive amount of company data and potentially sensitive data. And we don't want that happening. Nobody wants that happening. And of course, this is something that we can also assist with and make sure that these sort of things are not happening within the organization. If you do have some company approved maybe solutions for using AI in one which form or another, again, we can talk about how we can also allow certain things to be used and restrict others, but we'll get on to that later. Naturally, also with data storage, I mean, this also goes with the example I just made, but AI or LLMs or whatever you want to call them, it's essentially just a big black box. You don't necessarily know where all of this data is going. And that can be for something like ChatGPT or Copilot or what have you, but there's also many other solutions out there which are using AI in one which form or another, but not necessarily know what data it's picking up on per se, and as well as where is that data going? Who has access to that data once it's in the solution? And again, these are things that we're all trying to help and prevent these sort of things from happening, to make sure you have an understanding of where your data is going, who has access to it, and so on and so forth. Synthetic data, this is actually a pretty interesting one in terms of also a lot of times you're using AI to help you with something and you need to create maybe some sample sets of data for this, that, or the other. And by doing that, you could also be flooding your system with many, let's say false positives could be a good way to put it, or just, again, it's bogus data. It's not actually real data that may look very, very similar to something that is indeed legitimate within the organization. But this can also, again, raise some red flags. If you see maybe there's some data that's flying around inside of that data, it looks like, again, it could be maybe invoices or bank statements or whatever it may be. Looks real, but might not be, because again, it was created by some sort of AI solution. And naturally, last but not least, the misuse of AI or any malicious attacks being done in conjunction with AI. I believe the topics above kind of summarized all of that in terms of how it can be used in potentially nefarious ways. And more often than not, it's not meant to be nefarious. It's just people trying to do their job. They're just trying to work in one way or another. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, the weakest link for the majority of anything cybersecurity related is going to be the human aspect. Everybody makes mistakes. That's just, how it is. But we want to be able to, again, reduce that and make your environment as secure as it can possibly be. So on to the next area here. Now here, I want to talk kind of quickly about data loss prevention as well as insider risk management. So historically, these are two separate solutions. And also for Safetica, we have been in the business of doing both of these things for quite a while now. And primarily, we were dealing with data loss prevention historically. A few years back, we started to integrate some of the insider risk management portions into our solution. And now we do present our solution as a DLP solution as well as a insider risk management solution. So not only can we help organizations to detect, classify, and protect the sensitive data that is within the organization, we can also analyze the user's behavior to understand what they're doing, when they're doing, why they're doing certain things, and also associating risk levels to these actions. If some individuals are potentially moving around data where, let's say it's, I don't know, midnight or something, and somebody's just moving around some data, it very well could be perfectly fine and perfectly safe. Although at the same time, it's outside of the working hours, so that could be a small, let's say, red flag to raise the threshold there for the risk. If somebody's accessing some files, which maybe they normally never access or they never have accessed, that could be another thing to raise that risk level. Or it could also be then maybe the files, maybe there's 50 files that they're moving. They generally only move maybe anywhere from 3 to 10 or something like this. Again, that would be something else to bump up that risk level. So again, we have naturally actually our historical DLP side of things, which that's been our bread and butter for a very long time. Insider risk has also been something we've been integrating into our solution, and now we have a nice bundled package of DLP as well as insider risk management to help organizations of all shapes and size to, well, first off, protect their data and understand where that data is, what it is, who has access to it, and so on and so forth, as well as to understand what the users are doing on those machines and with that data. So yeah, quick spiel regarding that. Let me just check time. Okay, we're doing good. And I would say from this point, yeah, one more slide, I think, and then we get to the demo. But so when it comes to Safetica, so we do have our cloud native solution and extends the protection from the endpoint up into the cloud. Again, I'll go over how we kind of go about this with the quick demo session that we'll be doing. Also, DLP controls with behavioral insight. That's what we were just talking about, where Safetica is putting the two things of DLP and insider risk management into one bundle. And then, of course, we are naturally protecting the data wherever it may go, whether that be sending it out via email, putting it on to maybe some external server or something like this, or even onto a thumb drive or what have you. There's many different ways, many different options how people can try to exfiltrate data, but by using Safetica, we can help mitigate that as much as possible. One more here, there we go. So just a quick overview here again of kind of us and what we do. So we're detecting and protecting your sensitive data. And naturally that's including classifying the data, the restriction of said data, looking at the insider risk side of things, as well as protecting your data in the cloud. So without any further ado, we are now on to the demo side of things. So I will switch my environment over here. Yep, that looks great. And here we are. So this is the Safetica console. And actually, before I get going with this, if anybody had any questions or anything they maybe wanted to mention from anything that I had said prior, again, please feel free to use the chat or the questions or whatever it's called in GoToWebinar. And please feel free to put that in there and we'll get to that after this quick little session here. And of course, if there's any questions off of anything that we have from this session, or rather from this demo now, again, please feel free to put any questions or comments there as well. So starting off here, this is our solution. This is Safetica. To be more specific, it is Safetica Pro, and this is the option where our DLP functionality comes into play. We do also have another variant, a lower tier of the solution called Essentials, which is purely just monitoring of kind of the actions happening in an environment. Then if you actually want to then restrict those actions in one which way or another, that's where then Safetica Pro comes into play. And so what we're seeing right now, this is just the standard data flow of what's happening on the endpoints where Safetica is installed. So we do have an agent and a client which reside on endpoints, whether that be a Mac or Windows machine, can also be Windows Server. And also we can also tie into 365 as well. And I'll get to that in a sec. So wherever we have the agents installed essentially is where we're monitoring the data flow. And again, also that does include the 365 environment. So this is all just some demo data from our environment here. So we can see there's been 131 audited operations. So essentially anybody copying, moving, opening, deleting, creating, what have you, that's all going to be marked here. And we can see, again, it's all demo data, but still there's been some random files that have been manipulated with in one which way or another. We've got the user here, the action that was taken. We can see this was also, there was an override. I'll get into these again in a second. We can see the source of the data, the kind of the source that would be, destination, it was sent via email. Was it a safe destination? No, it was not. The operation, again, sent via email, and the application being used in that case. But again, forgive the demo data here. And if you do want more insight, we do have these available here, just to kind of, again, the overview of the info that we capture. So actually looks like I have everything selected except the override description, but regardless. So this is kind of a, whoops-a-daisies, a quick idea as to how we kind of capture the information, what it looks like in the console. But again, this is just any and all information as to what's happening on the machines. It's not necessarily specific to something maybe sensitive or not, but just to give you a quick overview, this is how this looks. We've got the blocked operations if you want to specifically look at that, or any sharing that was done via 365. Now, There's many things in here which we can go over, although I don't want to take up all of the time that we have with kind of drilling into this. So I'll just go into a few key areas. And one thing I'll do first actually is going to this cloud service section here. So we don't have this set up in the environment right now, unfortunately, but this is our 365 tenant, and this is used to synchronize AAD, for example, as well as to hook into Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, what have you, within the 365 environment to ensure that we are monitoring everything that's going on up there, and again, to put in some restrictive policies if needed for information being sent from the 365 environment or things along those lines. Now, with any DLP solution, and if you're not necessarily familiar how they work as a whole, you need to start with classifying your data in one which way or another. We have many different ways about how we go about this, and we've got some predefined templates here for finance, healthcare, and personal information. I created two here just kind of to show examples of how we can go about classifying data more specifically. So in this specific instance, I went with CAD designs, can be any sort of file type really at the end of the day, but what I had ended up doing here, so, and again, all you need to do to create any sort of a new data classification, give it a name, and you need to give it some rules associated to this. Now, if I open this, which I'd already done a bit earlier, so we can choose from a few different options here. I'll kind of show you in a more rather less busy environment after I go through this, but we can see, we can choose the application category, for example, that the application came from, or it could be the application specifically that it got spit out of. In this instance, I just chose CAD software as kind of a group, but for example, you could also choose SolidWorks or something like that specifically for the CAD software. Also, you can designate certain files or that files that reside within a certain path as sensitive. In this instance, I just made up some fictitious, let's say, external server or something like that. So CAD designs, anything that resides on this CAD designs server would then be labeled as sensitive. And then last but not least here, I just went with the standard CAD files overall. And what that kind of looks like, or what I mean by that is, I can see here, this is just giving you basically all the extensions kind of that fall under the CAD category, or you could do specifically .CAD, for example. You can add any kind of extension in here, or you can use from this kind of library depending, and we do have a decently extensive library as you can scroll through and choose many different things here. But I'll just keep that set like this. And again, just a quick example as to how we can go about categorizing some data, and kind of a more practical example. So we would want to make sure that it came out of some CAD software. We want to make sure that the file type is also CAD, and we want to make sure that it's stored in this path. If it meets all that criteria, then it will be labeled as such. Of course, you can make things more broad or less broad depending on what you're looking to do, but that is a kind of a more realistic example as to how we can go about and classify data. Now, going over some other ways, and I'll just use the same one here. Now, everything in the first CAD was AND statements, so it has to meet all of those requirements to then be classified. Let's say if this was a new classification, we can choose from our predefined algorithms that we have. You can use keyword searches, regular expressions, app category, file path, also web domains. So for example, maybe like Salesforce or HubSpot, like a CRM system. If people are pulling data down from that, you could maybe label the information as such. And again, for something like a CRM solution, it could be maybe, let's say it comes from HubSpot.com and it has keyword client in it or something like this, and the file type is a spreadsheet. Well, that's more often than not going to be a client list. Maybe you want people to be able to have access to these things and share them off the machine willy-nilly, maybe not. So you can classify the data, for example, in that way. It's actually a pretty good example, I think, as to how we can go about classifying the data, and again, a practical example here. And actually, last but not least, we can leverage any third-party existing classifications that might be already used. For example, could be from AIP, Purview, whatever Microsoft's calling it nowadays, or it could be basically from almost any other data classification company, solution, vendor, what have you. Most are using metadata for classifying their information, and we can then pick up on that and use that as such also. So for example, if I open this up, we can again grab the identifier and also grab a tag as well if needed, and we can Also do something here with regex also. So again, just wanted to show that real quick, kind of how we go about classifying the data, the different options that we have when it comes to classifying data. And again, in a somewhat practical sense, I wanted to show also kind of how it could work for maybe some USPII. I broke this down individually just because for more of a visual aspect. So for example, I went and got some regexes, for example, for social, also EIN, again, regex for that, very basic one. Some Medicare beneficiary number, it's actually a quite complex one. The passport MRZ, this is actually an interesting one. I was going about and trying to understand actually for passports, if you have a collection of those for one reason or another, and they're scanned or something like that. The MRZ is that identifier at the very bottom of the passport. And so, for example, if you want to make very sure that you're catching maybe a scan of a passport, that could be also a great way to do it, or of course, just a standard passport number. But anyways, this is how we can set up a very simple, actually just data classification for PII using regex. And from that point, then we would go over to the policy side of things and create some policies for that. In here, so I just created some policy, block sensitive things, and those sensitive things would be CAD designs and USPII. Now, one thing also I want to go over here and kind of show you how we can deal with our policies and the customization that can be done for these sort of things. So we see then got the data classification set here. You can put as many as you want or as few as you want. The action, of course, that can be selected as well, but because I have this advanced control set, and you could set these individually, but I primarily wanted to do that for this grouping here, which I'll get there in a sec. And this was just again to show what can be done here. So normally this would be allow, log, block, and block with override. And going through here, so we can see, for example, emails. We want maybe people to send emails with this information, but only to safe destinations. And I'll get to that in a second as well. But otherwise, if not, then it's blocked. Same goes with external storage. Safe destinations could be some company approved USB drives or external hard drives or something like that. Great. If it falls outside of that safe area, then block. Instant messaging, we don't want anything going to instant messaging, so we block that. 365 file sharing, again, if it's within your company ecosystem, great. If not, block. Same difference goes, and again, you can kind of just see how this is set here for the others. And naturally on the bottom, we've got, Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, nothing that the company would use, at least in this instance. So we want to restrict the upload of information there as well. And also web upload, for example, you might have some company intranet or something like that where you need to send information up there. Again, if it's in your safe destination, great, and it won't be blocked. If it falls outside of that, then it will be blocked. And on the bottom here, we see how we can have this applied. So it's either right now to the entire company, or if I wanted to get more specific, it would be something along the lines of maybe we just want this onto the development team for one reason or another. Or if we want to get as granular as we want just this machine, great. Or maybe we only want this user. Then, if whoever's logging on to whatever machine where Safetica is installed, but if it ends up being this user, then they will have these restrictions applied to them. And of course, you can customize the teams and how things are set up here. This is all going to be generally pulled from Active Directory or AAD, make it nice and easy for everybody, but you can configure your teams also specifically to your needs. And then also at the bottom down here, we've got block copying to clipboard as well as blocking screen capture. So just want to go over that for you all, and hopefully that all made sense. And again, if there's any questions regarding any of this or anything really, just please feel free to then pop a message into the chat. Right, so other than this, when it comes to policies, at least how we go about things, we can also deal with the usage of applications. For example, I created some other dummy things here, for example, to allow the usage of Adobe Acrobat, but to block anything other than that. And when we're doing the rules here for the solution, we do have to structure them in the sense where you would put the least restrictive one first and the other next, just as it's when it's reading the processes, essentially, it would first see, oh, I can allow this, but if it does not fall under that allow, then block, essentially, if that makes sense. So that's how we can go about also kind of restricting the usage of certain applications on machines. Also, same would go for websites. Again, I just made some dummy thing here, AI bad, and made some websites. So we got ChatGPT and Copilot. And also I'd kind of use an example here of going through the users and specifying some areas. And let's see, what did I do here? Yeah, so actually I restricted this for everybody other than the devs. Maybe the devs need it for some of the coding they're doing. Maybe they need some assistance and they don't want to use Stack Overflow or what have you. And we'll just ask Copilot or ChatGPT to help us out with our code. So again, this is just some examples of how the solution can be configured. External drives, I don't really have anything too special here other than, for example, going into here for any external drives, we have the action to block, again, unless they're safe devices. So blocking, Bluetooth file transfers or just Bluetooth devices in general, USB drives from being plugged in, as well as Windows portable devices, again, applied to the entire organization. Again, you can remove those, add some more depending on what you want to do, but again, I hope you get the idea. And last but not least is the auditing side of things. And this is where we are getting the information from just any and all of those file transfers that I kind of went over on that first data pane. This is where we get the information from that, for example. But if you don't want to see who's doing what when it comes to the application usage, you can simply just go like that and go like that and save that as such. And now you're not going to be picking up on that data anymore. Maybe you're really only concerned about emails and files. You don't care about anything else, and you can turn that off, for example. And again, specify for certain users or not. Just depends on what you want to do. Right, so going back to policies, I'm trying to think of anything else I would want to show you in this environment specifically. This is our SaaS environment, so we have everything hosted in Azure, nice and locked up and safe, and every environment, of course, is unique to every organization. And of course, I do also have a on-premise instance here that I'm actually going to be showing you as well to kind of show you how things work in practice, essentially. Before I do that, I'll go into data destinations real quick. We don't have anything in here, again, because test environment, or rather it's pre-populated demo data. But this is essentially where you would be seeing any of the USB drives, email domains, web domains, servers, what have you, that you're interacting with the machines. And then you can simply grab those and move them into your safe or untrusted destinations. So quick overview of that. I know it's not the greatest because there's no data here. Also device management real quick. This is where you get an overview of all the devices that have Safetica running on it. Again, demo data, so that's why a lot of this is confused, but regardless, I hope you get the idea here. And then also then information regarding the users, and I need to go into Teams here, and then we can get a better idea as to who's who or who's set up in certain teams. And again, you can create a team, you can move things around, edit how things are structured, again, just depending on what you're looking to do here. Also, real quick, go over alerts. We can set alerts for any blocked actions, notify, or override actions. Again, depending, you can select all of them or maybe just block, depending on what you want to do, as well as the risky operations alert. And actually, speaking of the risky operations, that was one thing I failed to mention, where that's going to show up here again because demo data, but this is the analysis also that we're doing on the user to understand, is this normal behavior? Is it maybe a low risk, medium risk, or high risk, depending on whatever actions they have been doing. So I forgot to mention that one real quick. But regardless, so again, that's kind of how things look here. And then one quick thing I just want to show you guys in practice how the solution works and kind of how it feels. So here I made some sample file for CAD. We see this right here. And we got that just sitting on the desktop. And if I go to the policy section here, I think I have this set for block. Yeah, so I have some US Medicare identifier as well as CAD. So for example, if I wanted to try to share that around, I go on WeTransfer, nice and easy way to kind of show how this works. And I'll go to try to upload that, get a link, and something went wrong. We get the pop-up down here, and if we do want some more info as to what happened, but we just see file was blocked, see the application, file in question, the domain, as well as the data category it pertains to. There's nothing the user can do about this. Once this has happened, they can't go any further. That is what it is. Now, for example, we also have then policy for notifications, and I can show you that in a second as well as blocking with override. I'll do notification first and then go back to block with override, and it looks like I have my classification for invoices, and I believe that was using regular expressions as well as a keyword search. Now I just got to find where I put it. Demo data, yep, invoices, there we go. So for example, a PDF. So I can go here again, get a link. It will be thinking about it. We see it scanning it. And this is the notification. So unauthorized upload of file. It looks very similar to how it was before. I can again open it for more information. If I want to upload anyways, I can. I can simply just say, yes, I do want to continue with this action, or maybe I want to cancel out of the action because I realized, whoops, this is actually not what I wanted to do. I didn't know this was maybe sensitive or secure, so I can cancel out. But you know what, in this case, let's just upload anyways because why not? So for example, again, we can see now it does allow the file through. Notifying is a good way for education, let's say. But of course, if you do want to be more restrictive, just flat out blocking will be better, or the block with override. And that one was source code, and that's just based on the file extension of a Python file. So let's just do that, for example. And we see file upload was blocked, override, and we have to give a reason. So one-time exception, I need to send this file places. And again, we can override it and it will go. The override as well as the notify, they seem very similar, although the difference is with the override is you do have the log of why they needed to do that action. And of course, you can go back to the individual at some point and say, hey guys, you weren't supposed to do that. And why did you do it? Why did you need to do it? And at least you have some sort of information opposed to just seeing, okay, it looks like it just went through because they said it could when it was set for notify. Hopefully that also kind of gave you some insight into how our solution works and feels in the real world. And really, other than that, I'm trying to think of anything else I would want to show you at this point in time. But I don't think I necessarily have any more. I could go quite a lot longer and more in depth into some of these other areas, like I'll switch back to my SaaS version. For example, the application side of things, this is again where we have the insight and overview of the application usage in the organization. So we can see, the most used apps here. World of Tanks is number one. That's not necessarily what you would want to see. And again, this is the insight that we can get from these sort of things. If you would maybe see that somebody's spending a bit too much time on certain things. And again, we can go per user, drill down via the users and see, what they've been doing or kind of the active time overall that they've been spending on certain things, the categories that folks have been using in terms of the applications and so on and so forth, or any maybe blocked activity that we have here. So it looks like we have a activity for Notepad, not allowing somebody to use Notepad for one reason or another. So again, quick overview for applications, and websites will be very similar as well, just the overall usage of these things. And also going into this behavioral side, even though it looks very similar to what we have here, we get very granular in this area where we can go down to the few number of seconds in understanding who's using what applications and when. And that is going to be more or less, so for example, I'm in Firefox right now, and if I were to click into, well, I'll just go into here, for example, or actually, no, I want let's see. Yeah, so now that I click into here, for example, it'll show that I'm in a different application. If I go back and I click again into Firefox, it'll then switch and show me that I'm now in Firefox. So it's essentially whatever active window you are using, that is what we're recording for the application usage. And website usage would be the same difference. If you're on a website, you're browsing the site, you're scrolling around, and you go to a different site or something like that, then we will be able to capture that, of course, as well. And yeah, I think that's more or less where I want to leave it for the demonstration side of things. And I'll get back to the PowerPoint here. And I'll open it up now for Q&A. I hope, Michael, you are still here to assist me with any questions that we may have coming in.
Hi, John. Yes, we've had a couple of private questions come through.
Okay.
I'll go with the first question, which is, how does Safetica monitor data moving around in the cloud?
That was actually one thing I did go over somewhat briefly when it comes to the cloud services side of things. So if it will decide to be happy here, there we go. So this is actually done via the 365 tenant. It's pretty straightforward in terms of getting that set. As long as you're an admin within your 365 account, you'll just essentially do all users, continue, and it'll essentially then ask you for permissions to add this tenant into your 365 environment. Once this is done loading, yeah, you would continue with authentication, and then essentially you just go there. I think there's two different boxes that come up to allow the access to that. And then within a few minutes or so, everything will start showing up here that things are syncing and ready to be protected. So yeah, that is essentially how we're monitoring what's going on in the cloud storage. And when I say the cloud storage, I'm mostly referring to 365. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
Great. And just one final question I can see, which is how often is information shared or sent between the database and the endpoint?
Right. So for that, that would be, it's a well, two-part question. So I mean, of course, as soon as anything happens on the machines, the information gets sent back to the database, whether that's Azure or if it's on premise if you're hosting it yourself. So as soon as any actions happen on the machine, those log information gets sent back to the endpoint, anything that happens on the endpoint gets sent back to the database. If there's nothing happening on the endpoint, in that case, it's checking in with the database side every 3 minutes or so just to check the configurations and if anything has changed and that it may be missed for one reason or another. Also, generally, when you would make any sort of change on the console side, for example, if you make any sort of change in the classifications or the policies here, then that will be reflected in on the endpoint, anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes, again, just depending on the connections and how many, whatever has to bypass to get there essentially. So yeah, basically it's pretty instantaneous when there's an action done on the endpoint or an action done on the server side. Although if nothing's happening in the meantime, it's up to 3 minutes that it'll take just to kind of check back and forth to see what's going on. Also on top of that, when we're talking about kind of connections between the endpoint and the database side of things, also everything that is set on a machine when it would go offline, for example, everything is still protected. So for example, if you have, this machine, if I were to go and turn off my internet or something like that and try to share some information onto a flash drive or whatever, sending it in the, let's say, the more old school way, all the policies, everything is still set and it will still be either, logged, blocked, notifications, what have you, that will all still show up. And when you are connected again back to the internet, all of the logs that it might have been keeping in the meantime will get sent back up to the database. Yep.
Great, thanks, Sean. There are no other questions.
All right.
Anything in the chat, actually, so there's nothing so far.
Cool, no worries then. I'll give a little bit of time for any folks who might want to ask some more questions. Other than that, then looks like we're actually decently on time here and we'll be able to wrap up shortly. But yeah, guys, anybody else, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them here. Additionally, if you would like any more information regarding Safetica or would like to see more maybe of an in-depth or personalized demonstration of the solution, or to even test out the solution by the means of providing us a trial essentially, or even running like a proof of concept, that's something that we're more than happy to assist with. Just please let us know. You can either, of course, come back to us in any which way or form, and also naturally we'll be following up after this session as well, just to double check on some things. But yeah, Michael, anything else in the meantime? Otherwise, I think we can wrap it up for today.
Yep. Let's see. So there is one question that's come through. And it's saying, what's the default behavior of an endpoint when the connection to the SaaS policy manager isn't available?
Yeah, so it's no different for the SaaS solution versus an on-prem deployment. There's no difference there. It's just, for example, so let's say you have the policy set for those CAD documents and things like this. Now, if you disconnected from the database side in one which way or another, let's just say you turn off your internet, whatever policies or anything that had been configured, then that was on the machine at the time of the internet disconnecting, everything will still apply. It's just that there's nothing new is going to be sent to the machine, of course, because there's no internet. So if you do change any policy configs, that's not going to be affected until naturally you reconnect to the internet. But anything that you had set prior to the disconnection will still be working just as it would if the internet were connected. Yep. I hope I answered your question. Yeah. Anything else, Michael?
No, those are all the questions.
Okay, fantastic. And we're bang on time, which is fantastic also. And yeah, so I suppose we'll just wrap things up for today. But again, I'll just kind of go actually back a few slides just to wrap it up. But anyways, thank you all very much for hopping on this webinar today. It was great seeing you all again. And yeah, hopefully we can speak more soon. And yeah, see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.